Hello, 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 beautiful ladies in our group here. How are you this evening or this morning for Patricia, joining us live from all the way from Portugal. And I believe it's about 8 a.m. there. So thank you so much for making time for our community and sharing your expertise with us. I'm actually really excited about this because astrology is one of my passions, one of my loves, but I haven't ever gone fully into it, but I follow it, if you know what I mean. So I'm excited to hear from you today, and I'm sure some of our audience will be as well. So if anyone's watching live, let us know in the comments. I haven't got my phone near me because I find that distracting when I'm trying to do too many things to see, but I think it'll show up in the StreamYard portal here as you comment, and also mention your name because StreamYard doesn't always show our names, and that would be lovely to know. So I am really, as I said, excited to welcome Patricia here, who is a spiritual life and business transition coach and astrologer. And Patricia is a former aerospace engineer and turned astrologer, and she supports people who feel like they don't belong. How many times I've said I don't belong? Oh my goodness. We're all a bit different, a bit unique, where they are, professionally and, when I can't get my words right, because I lost my track of thought, belong, where they are professionally and want to find their true calling and or start their own business. She does it through magical combination of coaching plus also astrology, and it's Astro-Coaching, I believe, that you do, so that they can thrive in business and life with less hustle and more ease. So firstly, Patricia, I am so keen to know how you actually went from aerospace engineer to astrologer. That is, I'm sure, the big question on everybody's lips. So would you mind just briefly, I know sometimes these stories
I will try very hard to make it brief.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how I ended up in aerospace engineering to begin with was, I think, at the time I really wanted to be an airline pilot. But I wanted to be an airline pilot, I think, mostly because I just wanted to travel for free.
Right.
Right.
Like
And I knew I could not be a flight attendant. Like I would not have the dealing with people that were, like out of control, or like, they deal with so much, right?
Yes.
So many things. So I was like, nah, I can't. I just want to be up there flying the plane and getting some, ways to travel. And my parents were, who were kind of footing the bill on my education, or like, my dad said that's just a big bus driver in the sky. So no. So then I didn't know, like, I'm looking in the college catalog. I'm like, oh, aerospace engineering. Okay, that's close.
Yeah, that's close.
Sure. And then, of course, I was good at math and science. They're like, yeah, go do that. Okay. So I did it. I realized day one of my first job, like, okay, this is not what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And I began the journey of trying to figure out what that was. And so I ended up doing that for 7 years. But then I got a master's in psychology because that's what one does, I guess.
What else does one do? Yeah.
And so but it was hard to find a job in that field. I ended up finally getting, like, at a research center a job, and it paid very, very little. So then I ended up at a school where I was in the technology department, helping them implement laptops in the classroom. And then I learned so much about technology and IT that I decided I should go into the corporate world and be in the IT world so I could make more money than I would at a school. So I did that for many years. And that was probably the bulk of my main career, was in IT management. So I managed help desks and support centers. And then I managed, various aspects of the IT department. And when my daughter graduated college, or actually high school, because I was a single mom, I decided to be a consultant in that because I could travel. So I did that for 5 years. I actually loved it because my Virgo, 4 planets in Virgo, loved it because I would go into an IT department, clean up its mess, the processes, the systems, make sure everything was flowing beautifully. And then I would get out and move on to the next chaotic problem and put order around it. And so it was wonderful. But in the meantime, there was this, I always called it the second Patricia, the hidden Patricia that was into the woo and the, just tarot and like whatever, like, I was into all that, but I couldn't, like, those two worlds could never collide in my opinion, because I was so very fearful of people finding out, and then like I would get fired and, all the things. So somewhere along in there, I was studying astrology. Also somewhere along in there, I became a coach. So, and I kept thinking those two things go together. So there was this whole other path that was happening alongside the career path. And at one point I just was like, I'm tired of being two people. And so I kind of started moving away from the corporate world, and into, what I'm doing now. And so that is kind of the roundabout path that got me from aerospace engineering to astrology, which I've been doing for almost 30, I can't believe it, not quite, maybe like 25 years now. I've been doing astrology, but part of that time was hidden.
It's like the closet astrologer.
Like if people who knew, but there are other people I just did not want finding out. So
and it's so common, right? We hide who we truly are all the time, and I guess we reach an age where we're like, well, you know what? It's now or never, because life's really short, and the wise part of us says, let's just go for what I love. And so that's amazing. But I'm thinking, when you were talking about the technical side of things and working with companies, and like that must serve you so well now in your online business. Like that's a skill that I would love to know, because it's not what I love to do, but we need it. We need it, don't we? Just even setting up this live stream, it's incredible. So thank you for sharing that beautiful story. So you've got a pretty diverse background by the sounds of it.
But this is why, I'll just say one thing, that this is why I love serving these people, the misfits, right, as I call them lovingly, right? Like, because that was me for so long in that world. I felt like I couldn't be all of myself, and you relate to it. I was the square peg in the round hole, right? And and it was my journey of getting out of there. And so I just love helping people now that I've kind of jumped the ship, helping other people also, come along. So
absolutely fantastic. Because I have a couple of questions for you tonight that came to my mind, that I feel like a lot of people would like to know or would like to understand more about. And I think you'd be the best person to explain it, quite frankly, because we hear different terms, like astrology, we hear horoscopes, and then we have astronomy, and they're often used like interchangeably, right? I just wonder if you could
not by astrologers or astronomers.
Exactly. But for us lay people, and I know a lot of people follow horoscopes, and they're hardcore, they live by horoscopes, and I know there's just so much more than just your horoscope, as you will probably share with us tonight. But just for the audience's sake, I guess, could you just differentiate between these terms and give a bit of clarity what each discipline sort of entails, or how astrology differs from astronomy?
The
role of
all the things,
and the role of horoscope as well. It plays in in the realm of astrology, because that is a part of it.
It is. It's like the gateway drug.
I love your I love it. Yeah. I knew we were going to have fun.
Always. Yeah. So, okay. So back, long time ago, thousands of years ago, maybe not even that long ago, astronomy and astrology were kind of all together, right? Like we had, we had those Renaissance guys, and even like in the medieval times, you go back and the ancient Greeks, where they looked at the sky and they understood the movements, or they were starting to trying to understand from a scientific mind, like why are those moving, and the patterns, and eventually they realized, oh, we're the sun's not we're not the center of the universe. There's the sun, and we go around it. So there was this scientific astronomy aspect to it, right? And that's what astronomy is. It's the scientific study of the actual physical universe, let's say, and how it all, works, like where the stars are, and, those kinds of the physical universe and how that operates.
Yep.
And astrology then has the layer of mythology over it, right? It has there's meaning behind the movements of the planet. And so it's literally, it's the language of the stars, right? Logos is language, astro, stars, right? So it's the what are they telling us? Okay. And so, like I said before, the kind of people who did that were doing both. They were studying, and there was meaning behind it. And then things happened more in the West, because, if you look at like Indian astrology and some of the Eastern astrologies, they didn't have quite the same, where now it's like, you're either crazy or something, if you're into astrology, you're an imbecile. Like there's something wrong with you if you study astrology. And it got to that point here in the West because of, one, the church, right, who was, they didn't want people knowing, seeing more than they needed to, than what they were telling them, right? And so it became, don't do that, it's a sin, or, all that kind of messaging from the church. I mean, not just it's a sin, the people who were astrologers or astronomers at the time, if they did that, any kind of like telling the future or saying, the earth wasn't the center of the universe, they got killed, right? They got burned at the stake, or they had their heads chopped off, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
like witches as well, like any sort of witchcraft.
So it started going like under, right? And and then the revolution came along, where, okay, if you can't touch it and see it and feel it and prove it over and over and over and over and over again, it's hocus pocus. And so between those two things, it really got shoved into the dark corners, and started, the comeback in the West came, I think, in the 70s with, the kind of hippie movement, and like, it kind of started coming with that. And then more recently, we've had people finding the old traditional astrology from the Greeks and the Arabs and the medieval philosophers, and translating them from the Latin and the Greek and the Arabic. And so now we have, and we're realizing it's the depth and the richness of astrology as a system, which, I think back in the 70s, we really didn't have that. So we get that modern astrology that's more psychological. But with traditional astrology, we now have actual, like, these are the rules, this is how it all works together. It's much more of a system, and there's much more of a forecasting element to it. So that's kind of a short history of astrology and difference between astrology and astronomy. And the horoscope is basically, I think we think of like the Sunday paper. At least I'm dating myself, maybe. Now you can find it everywhere online, where you're like, oh, I'm an Aries, and so let me read what's for Aries today, or whatever, what's going on. So that's just a small little, they're looking at your sun sign, number one, right? So which most people know, unless you're born on a cusp like me and you don't you might not be what you think you are.
Yeah.
So it's so limited though. And I think it's, again, astrology gets a bad rap because of that, because people are like, well, how can every Aries in the world be having the same day? Well, no, they can't, because there's so much more to your chart than that.
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? There's so much more to you and your chart and your blueprint when you were born, so to speak. And it's so fascinating to me that it has so much information. I remember I had mine done, oh my goodness, 30 odd years ago, and when my children were young, and it came back as a book. It came back as a book. I must dig it out, because it has so much information about the different even the different stages of my life. I was just blown away. And this is how powerful it can be, and how you can use it in your everyday life if you know what's happening. And that actually can only happen if you take the time to spend with somebody like you that can do the reading and give you the information that you can follow, right?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So could you then maybe explain how astrology can be used in providing like the insights that could help us, and specifically because my group is all about anxiety and overwhelm, and regulating energy levels and things like that. Could you maybe give us a little bit of insight into how that could be used?
Yeah. So, when you asked me to do this, I was like, this is a fascinating question. And so I jotted down some things that came to mind. And the first thing that came to my mind was the moon. This is an easy one. People have easy access to what's happening with the moon. So it's not like you need an astrologer. You can just literally go online and see like what the phase of the moon is, that sort of a thing. And to start even, so I have this little, you can get all, various ones of these little diary kind of things that are, let me see. This one's called The Magic of I. I just found it. If you go to their website, The Magic of I, they're beautiful. But it's it's a calendar, right? But it gives all the phases of the moon. And this one even talks about like the seasons, and it's got all the various, if certain planets are in certain places, or if the moon is in this sign, like it gives you a lot of information. And I think one of the easiest things for people to do is get something like this, or really anything, and track like your feelings, or your like, oh, I was really anxious on this day, and just maybe see if there is a connection between what's going on, at least with the moon, because the moon is the, in traditional astrology, it represents our body, even because it's the closest thing to the earth, right? So it, and we already know with scientific fact that when there's a full moon, we have more entries into emergency rooms, or, things like there's a heightened energy that goes on. And so
people get more excited. There's more parties happening.
I used to tell my daughter, when she was little, I remember one time I'd always go, it's a full moon. The lunatics are out. The lunatics are out, which is a word that comes from the moon, right?
From Luna. Yes, Luna.
And so I go, the lunatics are out. And my daughter, like, she didn't know like what I'm saying. She probably thought it was some mystical creature or something. And she'd be like, I want to see a lunatic. I want to see a lunatic.
Like a monster.
That
comes out at a full moon, like the werewolf. Where is he? Where is he? Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's like a nice, simple little introductory way, maybe, that just kind of track what's going on with you with the moon. The other thing is just the note, like, I think there's something about knowing, which I think is why people come to astrologers and tarot readers, and having, usually for feeling anxious or overwhelmed, it's the not knowing, like we're in a state of, I don't know how to get out of this, or we're in a state of what's happening, why is this happening, or is this ever going to end? There's a lack of knowledge, and so people want information, like, what's going to happen, kind of a thing,
or
right?
what's wrong with me,
or what's wrong with me, exactly, why am I doing this, or why is this happening? And so I think astrology specifically, because I do tarot as well, and I think it can provide wonderful insights too. But with astrology, we get a system that is visible to our eyes, right? Like it's like you see the stars move, and so we can look at the patterns of the stars and know that when certain things are happening in the sky, certain types of things tend to happen, right? And so just knowing that, I think, like, I have not ever had a client leave a session from me not feeling validated. I feel like that is the biggest thing I provide. Like, even if that's all it was, they walk away going, oh, okay, well, I'm not going crazy, or I'm not, like the pieces of the puzzle go together, because they can then see, like, oh, it's because
it makes sense.
This is the energy that's going on at the moment. And so it's not just me, or, or it is just me, but that's because of what's in my chart, or, like that sort of a thing. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest things astrology can provide, is just a like, oh, okay, I can get through this. I can. And the other thing that for me has been one of the biggest in my life, like realizations, I guess, that I just have been able to embody because of this work, is the fact that this too shall pass. This is my favorite saying ever, right? Because everything is cyclical. I was going to say secular.
Yes.
Cyclical, right? And so things come and they go. Jupiter passes, Jupiter goes away, or the sun rises, the sun sets. Like, everything is cyclical. And so if there's an up, there's a down. If there's a down, there's an up. And so we just know that. In fact, that is why there's so many, if you look back historically, a lot of sun god religions, right? Like, because the sun is constant. The sun rises, the sun sets. The sun rises, the sun sets. And people count on that, right? And which is why during eclipses, solar eclipses, people get back then would get like, because the sun didn't, or it went away when it shouldn't, or did something it shouldn't. But normally it's very steady. And so these cults and sects and religions and would honor the sun god, because they wanted to make sure he kept coming back.
Wow. Fascinating. And, I love that, it gives people validation. It gives them a purpose, and to support them in, I guess, managing what's going on for them.
Yeah.
And when you have that understanding and knowledge, you can work with it, right?
Exactly. You have knowledge. So even if there's like, well, it looks like stormy, times ahead, at least knowing that, I think, or if you have this knowledge that, well, until April or until whatever, and that's not a great time for, whatever it is, at least, okay, well, I can deal with that, because I know now, like, I have some kind of information that can at least maybe help me take it down a notch. It still might not believe everything, but I just think knowledge is power, and
and then action it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the next step, right? Okay, well, how am I going to manage this? And getting out your tools and using the tools that you have in your toolbox to navigate those ups and downs. And I think is really important too.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of my astrology teachers, she would always say, like, if somebody looked at their chart and they're like, oh, I got this, Mars doing whatever, and and she'd go, what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do about it? That was always like her question. If some, bad thing was happening in a chart, well, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant, because that is, as a coach, right? That's what we ask. We say, like, okay, well, what are your, and so rather than look at a thing and go, oh my God, that's terrible, and be the victim of it, it empowers us, right? And so having that empowerment can help alleviate the anxiety, I think.
Exactly. And that was my next question about because we're so in sync, right?
I know.
We're all energetic beings picking up on each other. But yeah, how can we use it to empower us? Well, you just shared exactly how to do that is, well, what can I do, rather than, well, sit in it and wallow and think, well, this is how I am. But there's actual choices that we can make in that moment to pull ourselves through it.
Exactly. And I think one of the choices that we often don't, especially in the Western world, don't want to do is to not do. Like, so like, give yourself grace, that the timing, like sometimes you just can't get off the couch, right? Like you're like, I'm watching Netflix and I'm eating popcorn and I really have no motivation to do anything else. Well, I mean, it could very well be that the energy of the time, it's not the time. Like, it's the time for the harvest. It's not, right? It's like there are times to rest, and we don't ever allow ourselves that, or very rarely. We feel like we have to be on all the time. We have to be doing, and if we're not doing, we're wasting time, and I think something from astrology that we can see is that, no, there are times that you are not meant to be doing things. You are meant to be resting, because that's when things percolate. That's when things are happening that you're not seeing, and you have to allow for that. And so I know it's hard when you're in the middle of something, but
I'm a big fan of it, because it's my mantra. Like, and you sometimes are struggling through the things that you think you should be doing, because that's how we're indoctrinated and programmed. We've got to be successful and we've got to do all this stuff. But often when it's the energy of rest, winter, it's time to replenish. And it's like the soil, we have to rest the soil before we plant the seed. We have to rest our bodies so that we can have more energy and insight to keep going. Absolutely. And you can, in fact, I've learned this the hard way, just, taking that time and not pushing through, because when I find I'm pushing through, nothing's happening. It's just like, bleh. It's just like, and you're just draining yourself and your energy. Whereas when I'm in flow and I have that, I feel the energy to move and go, I can knock out so much more.
Exactly. And we try and push through those times, those lulls, and it just ends up taking longer, whatever it is, because we're not going with the flow, honoring it. Exactly.
Yeah, that's such great advice, and it's really how I operate. And sometimes not even knowing what is happening up in the stars and the planets. But I think because I've been around so long, I've just learned and learned to, like, your own body rhythms as well.
Yes, for sure. And that plays into all of it too. Like, for sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
But also, I just want to say, everybody gets all irritated with Mercury when he goes to retrograde.
How did you know that was my next question?
We are like,
I was going to
you don't even need to speak. I'm just going to answer.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
I
really, because
ask you about the energy of Mercury, because we're in Mercury retrograde now.
We are, yes. Yeah. And so Mercury, poor guy, he is a little bit of a trickster, and
he gets a bad rap.
He does, but he does, I think, get more of a bad rap than he deserves, because what Mercury provides us during those Mercury retrograde periods, which happen three-ish times a year for about 3 weeks. So, and they're, kind of interspersed throughout the year. They happen. They're the perfect time to do a reset. Those are the times when you could take advantage of that time to rest, or
all the R's.
all the rewords. That's what I tell my clients. Redo something, reimagine something, rework something, anything that's already kind of established and you want to fix it or organize it or make it better in some way. Mercury retrograde times are perfect for that. It's not necessarily the greatest time to start a new thing. And the reason people say that is mostly because what often happens is you then have to rework it. Like something gets missed, an I doesn't get dotted, a T doesn't get crossed. There's going to be some kind of redo or rework if you do that. Again, it might not necessarily be a big deal. Like, if you feel like, oh, I'm going to launch my website during that time, but I know that I'm going to come back later and make it better anyway. So it's not that big a deal. You can do that. Like I just don't want people panicking. Like when it's like, you can't do anything. No, just if you're traveling, just allow yourself more time because flights might be missed or canceled or like those. Yeah. If you're having major communications with someone, make sure that, just know that there might be misunderstandings or there might be, ask for clarity. Like you just have to take longer and go slower during a Mercury retrograde, right? Okay.
And at the moment, it's from beginning of April to the end. Is that right?
It's almost the end. It's like the 24th. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So be mindful. Like do all the rest, recuperate.
Yeah.
Realign, reset. Yes. Like really.
Yeah.
Sort of spend that time with you is what I'm hearing from you now. Restart something, not start something new, but revamp
restart something or reevaluate. Great time for like just going through your files and organizing them, or like just taking the time to kind of redo things and make sure that they're in order and they're as you want them to be, kind of
as you want them to be. I love that. A good time to reorganize. So is there anything else that we need to be aware of during this period that you could suggest or?
Yeah. I mean, really, I think just having that awareness that it is not, I wouldn't sign major documents necessarily, like, or make major life decisions, kind of a thing that require a contract or something like that. Just because of this, like there could be a misunderstanding, you could misread something, you could, there's that going on. So if there's some way to hold off on that. But otherwise, I think, in fact, I was telling one of my clients who wanted to do a launch this April, and I told her, actually, I don't mind that you do a launch, like as an astrologer. I mean, obviously shouldn't need my permission, but I said, I think it's fine to do a launch during this time. I was actually more concerned that the actual time and day of the launch, that it not happen. I'm going to introduce a whole other thing during a void of course moon, because what that does with Mercury retrograde, you might have to redo something. You might have to come back a little, or it might, take a little longer. But with void of course moon, nothing comes of it. Nothing happens with things that start during a void of course moon.
And is that where we are now?
Is that it changes? The moon moves so quickly. It can happen for a few hours on a certain day. It can happen like for a couple of days. That's when you actually either need to like go online and try and find a void of course moon list, or have an astrologer help you find a good time for whatever it is you're doing, like that sort of a thing. So,
love that. Great advice. And I'm thinking on my good friend, I'm going to her wedding tomorrow. So
I'll give I don't know, who knows? She's I mean, the planning for the wedding has already started. So right. And I guess we could say, well, maybe she'll have to redo the wedding. I don't know, something like that.
Redo the vows later.
So let me tell you, when Obama got sworn in as president, it was Mercury retrograde. And astrologers were like, oh, we can't have that. But, it's on a particular day. Like, it just happens at that time. And they couldn't really, they weren't going to change it because the astrologers were screaming.
Nah.
So what happened was he did the vow, but the guy that was reading them to him, like he would repeat them or whatever, he'd say it and then he'd repeat. The guy, I don't know if he skipped a line. There was something like that, though, that happened where it didn't get read exactly as it should have been.
Yep.
And they ended up, a couple days later, they had to redo it. So I love that example. It is the perfect example of a messed up because of Mercury retrograde.
Wow.
Like it's a communication. Mercury rules communication, thoughts, thinking. Yeah, so that's why we get these misunderstandings. That's why I say, like, anything with communication, Mercury's going to have the, an effect. So the communication, the travel, like traveling is a Mercury thing, sales, because think of all the words like merchant, right? Because Mercury's the in-between planet, okay? So it's anything where there's an exchange of information or an exchange of money or an exchange of location, you're going somewhere else. Right. Okay. Those are all Mercury things. So when a planet is Mercury, when a planet is retrograde, it's not doing its function as easily. It's almost like it's being held back, right? Or and so all those things that it represents are not happening as smoothly.
Or smoothly. I'm not going to move forward as easily. And I love the piece about communication. So I think that's really important because we're all in relationships. We have to communicate. So that would be a really powerful area to focus your time and energy this season, because we possibly could learn to communicate better and be more specific and precise and almost over communicate. So that you're not misheard or misinterpreted, because that's easy to do at the best of times. Right?
Exactly.
So that could be something that the listeners could take away, as well as all the other things about not starting anything new. And was thinking about, a retreat venue, but I might just hold off till next month. Things like that.
Exactly.
It's useful. And is there anything else you would like to share? Or
I was just going to say, when you were talking about the communication, I just have a funny story. This was years and years ago. I was still living in Texas, and I was talking. It was a Mercury retrograde, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about Mercury retrograde, and she kept saying, "It doesn't affect me. It has no effect on me. I've never noticed anything." And the entire time that we're having this conversation, our call kept getting dropped. And we'd have to get back on and continue this conversation about how she was not being affected at all by it.
Yeah.
And finally, I had to point out, I'm like, Sonia, do you realize like what's happening here?
Yeah. You denying it is actually...
It's happening while you're denying
the energy. The energy is working regardless. Wow. Now, that's interesting. That is a very good example. So everybody, just be aware in the next few weeks.
Just be aware and work with it. Work with the energies rather than against them.
Against it. And if any of you feel called to reach out to Patricia to do a session and do your chart, then absolutely she will drop the links into the chat after, into the comments, so that you can find her. And I really encourage it, because it gives you a lot of knowledge about yourself, and perhaps that you may not have realized. It's quite deep and in depth and very powerful to know you, to connect more with yourself and how you operate in the world and how you feel in the world. So please, Patricia, pop your links in there so people can find you easily. And yeah, I thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
This is fun. Yeah.
We could
It
talk
went
about
really
for
fast, I feel like.
it has. It's been like 40 minutes right now, and I know the attention span of a lot of people. But
Yeah.
anyone have any questions, drop them in the comments. Patricia's in our group, so I'm sure she'll be happy to come back in and answer them. Because we could go on all night.
Yeah, I know. I could.
You could,
It's
yeah,
my favorite
yeah.
thing to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I really appreciate your time. I know you had a very late night last night doing another course. All of us are big learners, aren't we,
Yeah.
in this industry?
Yeah.
And you're up early to speak to us. And it looks like a beautiful sunny day in Portugal. So enjoy the weather, enjoy the day, and thank you again for being a guest of our Wednesday Wellness
Thank
series.
you for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, you're welcome. See you again. Maybe we could do a part 2 sometime.
I'd love that. Yeah.
All right. Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye, Patricia.
Bye.